I am of the opinion that this is the reality of the modern NBA. This is more miles ran per game because of more possessions per game because of the rate of play, and you're adding the wear and tear of running, which is one of the most tiring, high impact things you can do, with a bunch of athletes who, for the most part, maybe do not have the most natural running gaits. Like, these are not cross-country runners. These are NBA athletes. They have atypical body, limb lengths, atypical kind of biomechanics and anatomy, and they're recruited for that. And with the way the game is today, you're doing this high-impact, fatiguing activity, and then you're putting in, of course, as we know, the explosive athletic movements that you have to do as a basketball player on top of that. It's just a recipe for these injuries to happen.
Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping notes. First, this episode is brought to you by Shot Ready. So this is a book about Steph Curry's life. You can see it here. Very thick. And what's unusual about this book is that it's a photography book. And it has pictures of Steph Curry's life from when he was in grade school to Davidson to the Golden State Warriors. Just a different book. I appreciate it because I'm more of a visual person, so I love just reading regular books. But anytime there's photography, I just think like it just brings the life story of the person being profiled to life. So check this out at your local bookstore, a New York Times bestseller. Just check it out on Amazon. So if you go Black Friday, it'll probably be on sale, so go check that out. Another housekeeping thing is our recent slate of guests. So check out our archives. Check out Allie Clifton, who is the silent reporter for Amazon Prime. That episode is up. We have interviews with reporters covering the Utah Jazz, the Timberwolves, the Houston Rockets. We've interviewed Shea Serrano. A shout out to Matt and Allen for having a great interview with the Utah Jazz reporter, Eric, and I'm going to screw his name, Ferropoulos, as well as Danielle Lerner, who is wrapping up her tenure at the Houston Chronicle as well. You guys killed those interviews, so much appreciated. We have our slate of PA announcers as well. So check us out, like and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube, and also we're available on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you listen to your podcast as well. So truly appreciate it. And give us a like if you like this video. So, all right, enough promotions. Let's jump into it. And as the recording of this podcast, let's get into some way-breaking news. That is, Chris Paul is retiring after this season. So if you listen to other sports podcasts, football podcasts, I think you know that Chris Paul is having a not-so-good season, only averaging about 2.5 points a game. Chris Paul is retiring, concluding his 21st season in the NBA. He is a 12-time All-Star, 11-time member of all NBA teams, a selection to the 75 greatest players list, 9-time defense, and 2006 Rookie of the Year. And by the way, the bane of, I think, the Lobos' existence when they played, I think, Wake Forest. Do you guys remember that game?
Yeah.
When they played Wake Forest? Yeah. So I remember that game distinctly. So anyways, what is your guys' thoughts on Chris Paul retiring, his legacy? And I'm going to start off with Matt. What's kind of your feelings about this news?
Well, I'll start with kind of a cheesy analogy here. In NBA 2K, which we talked about recently, there's an attribute there, like a badge now, I think they are, that you can put on your players called Floor General, and the ability raises the abilities of all the people around you on your team when you have that equipped on your player. And I think Chris Paul, his basketball IQ, his skill set really personifies that skill. You know, Floor General is something you could take as an insult, but I don't mean it that way at all. When you look at, like, when Chris Paul finished his tenure in the Houston Rockets and went to OKC, that team was not supposed to make the playoffs, and he got them in there pretty handily. I believe they were maybe like the 6th seed or above that. And that's kind of what I will always remember about him overall, is he was a guy that when he was in his prime and even towards the outside of his prime, he would raise the floor of your team significantly. Everyone is going to point at him as a player that is one of the greatest to never have won a title. And that's just unfortunate. He very, very close, especially, I mean, Alan, you can touch on more than I can if you'd like. That Rockets run, that was maybe the best shot he had at winning a title that fell just short. But outstanding point guard, no doubt. We'll need to do a little more thinking once it's all said and done where he ranks among point guards. But I think he's in the NBA top 75. It's probably safe to say he's a top 5 point guard in history, or at least very close to that. Even if you want to treat his legacy, unkindly compared to how others might. But just a great career from Chris Paul. And I think maybe should have retired even before last season, but I don't fault him for wanting to hang around and try and be with a competitive Clippers team. And in some ways, kind of a nice storybook ending in a way that his career ends on the Clippers, because he made the Clippers into a regular competitive force in the Western Conference. He was really that piece that they added once Blake Griffin had started Lob City. He was that piece that they added that made them a legitimate competitive team in the Western Conference compared to the laughingstock that they were all years before Blake Griffin arrived.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few things. Matt, I think one thing you brought up, I think was just really interesting is that Rockets run, right? I mean, that Rockets team was a pretty deeply flawed team. Although, Harden always kept them competitive, they were deeply flawed. They didn't have a closer. That year where they made the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors, Chris Paul was the closer. In the playoffs, he was the guy that would hit that little mid-range and keep everything going. He seemed to be kind of a calming force on James Harden's ability to kind of screw things up in big games. His hamstring injury was absolutely a devastating blow and one of the great what-ifs, I think, in NBA history. Because if he doesn't tear that hamstring near the end of Game 5, I think the Rockets win that in 6, and then they probably sweep the Cavaliers. Kudos to Chris Paul. He raised the ceiling of that team. Another thing I want to touch on with him is that there are two things I think of non-basketball stat related when I think of Chris Paul. One of them is how instrumental he was to New Orleans post Katrina. Even though they're playing in OKC for that part of that season, Chris Paul was pretty instrumental in keeping basketball interest alive, and committed to that city. So kudos to him for that. The other piece I want to touch on is the mentorship. I think you can, I don't know, and maybe Shea would disagree with this, but SGA, I think, would not quite be the player he is now if he hadn't spent his second year in the NBA with OKC under the tutelage of Chris Paul. We saw tremendous growth from SGA that year. And I think you can potentially make the same argument for Stephon Castle. I think even as his skills deteriorated, he was a great mentor and was able to pass a lot along to those guys. You look at SGA's mid-range game and it's like, okay, I can see that, there's some Chris Paul in there. The last thing I want to say is I get kind of he didn't win a championship or whatnot, but I think I would safely say he might be top 2, potentially number 1 of the greatest 6 foot and under players the NBA has ever seen. And it's probably between him and Iverson. And Calvin Murphy's probably number 3 there. So I think that's just something to kind of to focus on. It's been a great career. I know the past 3 years have been, probably disappointing by his standards, but I still think he's brought a lot to the table.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Alan. That's well said. In the early 2000s, there was a real conversation, or I guess more late 2000s. Derrick Rose versus Westbrook versus Chris Paul. Like, you look at those guys' careers, and I think people being honest, if you could have one of those players on your team. Now, we know what happened with Derrick Rose. That was unfortunate, that derailed the progress he was making. But I think you pick Chris Paul of those 3 players if you want someone at the helm of your team for a career. So definitely a great basketball career. Curious, Justin, if you have any thoughts on Chris Paul as well as we hear this news.
Yeah, you guys basically covered it. And to both of your guys' points, do you think once it's all said and done, Chris Paul goes into coaching? I mean, those characteristics match up to an NBA coach. And we've seen, Steve Nash gets instantly a shot, Jason Kidd get a shot. Do you think Chris Paul instantly gets a shot of becoming a coach?
I'll go first on that one. I don't know that he has a temperament to be a coach. He does have a little bit of a reputation for being a little, I don't know, ornery.
That sounds like a head coach to me.
Yeah, I mean, he could be maybe somebody in the Udoka style. I think it's hard for very successful players to become successful head coaches. I think it's generally kind of the guys who grind and, have to really work hard at their careers. Not that Chris Paul didn't, but, I think the best players who go on to make coaches aren't the superstars. So I think that might be a challenge there. I think Chris would be really fun to watch, like at the studio or, honestly doing whatever he wants to do, because he deserves to go and do whatever he wants to do after the career he's had. But, I could see him transitioning more into like, a studio show or something like, Garnett used to do. So that's where, I don't know that coaching is necessarily something he feels like maybe wants to do. I could just see him getting really frustrated with other players really quickly.
Yeah, and be careful if you're the refs. If you got Chris Paul on the sidelines there, you had to be careful as a ref when he was playing. But no, I think, X's and O's, all that. I think if Chris Paul told most teams looking for a coach that he wanted to coach, I think he would get that shot. I'm just skeptical if he wants to do that. I think there's a little less resistance and a little less effort required to go the media route, and he could certainly do that just based on his name and legacy. If he wants to try the media route, he's welcome to do it. Honestly, I'm curious if he could fit in well as a color analyst, as a play-by-play on a TV broadcast, just adding insights during the game. I'd be curious to see what he decides to do after he hangs them up after this season.
That's true.
And I wonder too, like, is he? I mean, he's a potential front office guy too, because he's got an eye for talent. He's got an eye for mentoring, and he's certainly familiar with the bargaining aspects of that from his time with the NBA's Player Association. So
sky's the limit. Or he could go into bowling. So he loves the bowls. So
good point.
Be interested to see where he goes. Let's head into our main topic, and it's a somber one and something I really hate talking about, and that is injuries. We've seen a lot of injuries from the superstars to even, you guys are familiar with this. At the recording of this podcast, the Houston Rockets played the Denver Nuggets. Aaron Gordon didn't play in that game due to, I think, a hamstring injury. So it's just like, it's affecting everybody. I have some stats here. First, Yahoo Sports compiled data through the first 15 games of this season and found that NBA stars have already lost 213 games due to injury, more than double the total from 2 seasons ago, which was 100. But Jeff Stotts, a former guest on our show this year, so check out that episode, he says that the latest updates on Wemby and AD calf injuries, that's got me curious. To start, calf injuries are not up this season when compared to the last 5 seasons. It's common to see a spike in soft tissue injuries during the preseason and the first 20 games of the year. Some context, Jeff Stotts follows injuries in not only basketball, but sports in general. So he's not just a random fan. This is what he does. Just check out his site in Street Clothes. He continues and say, the time lost for calf strains in the NBA is roughly 2 to 3 weeks, but 1 in 3 cases will miss more than 20 days, and 1 in 5 cases will miss more than 30 days. And then Steve Kerr has commented saying the rise of injuries has drawn the attention of a lot of people, including Golden State coach Steve Kerr. He blamed a combination of the increased pace of the play around the league, the increased spacing in today's game, and the relentlessness of the NBA's 82-game schedule support the rise. So your guys' thoughts on just the recent rash of injuries? Looks like, Matt, you have a lot of thoughts on this. Is there something to be really concerned about, or do you think, hey, is this a random year where there's a lot of injuries, or do you think this is going to be a trend where the NBA is going to have to do something about this?
Yeah, so this is a big, messy topic, of course, and we'll spend some time here picking this apart. I am of the opinion that this is the reality of the modern NBA. This is more miles ran per game because of more possessions per game, because of the rate of play, and you're adding the wear and tear of running, which is one of the most tiring, high-impact things you can do, with a bunch of athletes who, for the most part, maybe do not have the most natural running gaits. Like, these are not cross-country runners. These are NBA athletes. They have atypical body, limb lengths, atypical kind of biomechanics and anatomy, and they're recruited for that. And with the way the game is today, you're doing this high-impact, fatiguing activity, and then you're putting in, of course, as we know, the explosive athletic movements that you have to do as a basketball player on top of that. It's just a recipe for these injuries to happen. I think having more contrast in the past was helpful, having that post-game, that in-and-out game, but I don't see a way that you can artificially engineer that back into the game. I just think even if we're changing the three-point line or things like that, all organizations are aware of the math that's going on here. I think the best we can hope for is that maybe smarter rotations or limiting minutes rather than load management of full games missed is going to help down the line. We'll get smarter and smarter about that. But I do think that the injuries are kind of a reality moving forward. I think two ways about it. You look at the ratings, which, Justin, you probably know this info already. The ratings are up despite the injuries, so it's not causing people to tune out on the broadcasts. Where I think I would be hesitant, like we've talked about before on the show, so I won't belabor it. I have to go out of town if I'm going to watch an NBA game, and I'm more and more reluctant each year to make that financial and travel and time commitment to go see a game in person as a fan. So I think the in-person continues to be damaged by this, but it doesn't seem like broadcast partners are going to be unhappy because, like I just mentioned, the ratings are up. And there's a lot more we can touch on with this, but I want to throw it over to Alan for your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you brought up some really good points because it for the fan experience, how disappointed it is if you travel. I mean, we're looking to possibly go up to Denver in December to watch the Rockets at Nuggets. But, you know, what if we get there and there's no KD and no Sengun or no Reed, you know, like Amon's out, you know, like then you're just, you know, it's a little disappointing. You know, I went and saw OKC at Phoenix, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. It was when Westbrook and Paul George were on the team and Paul George was out. So, you know, we got to see Westbrook, which was awesome, but, you know, it's, you know, I've still never seen Paul George play live. And it's probably too late for that because despite one good game here or there, Paul George is more playing dead than alive. So I think that is a huge point to bring up for people who have to travel to go see games. The other thing that is interesting to me is that you see a lot of things about kind of the impact on the teams and that sort of thing. And you run into that like, oh, you know, the Rockets and Nuggets were so close last night because Aaron Gordon was out. Well, you know, the Rockets are missing Fred VanVleet and Tari Eason. You know, and so it starts to become like, you know, people like to make those arguments like you just caught that team without, you know, one of their best players. But you know, the fact is every team is suffering through injuries. The best team in the league has been missing their second best player this entire season. I don't even know what you do against that team when they get that guy back, when J-Dub is back. I mean, so every team is going to go through this. you've seen, some teams have really good injury luck and some teams have really bad injury luck. But every team has got to figure out how to weather the storm at least a little bit when injuries start cropping up. A thing that I think concerns me, and I know, Stotts was very, adamant that the injuries are kind of the similar and there's not an increase, but it seems just from a feel, and I don't know, but it seems like superstar injuries seem to be on the rise more than anything. And that's the part I think that's kind of a key. I mean, and anytime you start mentioning calf strains now, I think everybody gets a little scared. So Wemby, you're like, oh, is his Achilles next? Is his Achilles, for fans, it becomes a little scary to kind of like, what does this mean for the team and what does this mean for that player? And we can get into this a little bit later, but do some players start to become known as injury prone as they kind of go through this? So I don't know. I'll turn it back to you guys to kind of comment on anything.
Well, Alan, that's a great point. And the point that I wanted to lead into is I also think the reality of the situation we're looking at is players are sitting more often for calf strains now because the teams are recognizing the investment that they're putting into the players. I think my hypothesis here would be that calf strains that we're seeing, like potentially, even what Wemby is going through. Obviously, I don't have his medical chart in front of me or anything like that. But I think these are the types of injuries that in the past players may have played through, but now teams are being hyper cautious because we have seen so many Achilles injuries that they are opting to, especially at this point in the season, let's rest our guy, make sure he's back to 100%. Or as close to it as we can get before we put him back on the court, where inevitably, like I pointed to earlier, there is going to be risk of injury no matter what you do. So I think the increased injury rate could also be sort of this man-made one that medical teams are just more and more cautious and more likely to sit their players rather than go into a situation where there's any chance that it's iffy on if that strain is going to progress into a more serious tear or overcompensation injury.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Justin, go on.
No, I just want to quickly mention this a couple of things. First, I think from a rating standpoint and from shorting the season, I'm talking to Sportico's Kirk Bohazen. There's no chance they're going to be shorting the season. I mean, in his words, it's like you shorted the season, expect the tickets to go up, expect your streaming services to go up. So I think it's going to go up anyways with the season being the same length. That's number one. And then I want to hear Alan's point, but I have a question for you both, because I've heard a lot of the old school players saying that training camp has gone soft in terms of preparing players for the season compared to back in kind of the old days where it's like they go harder during training camp to prepare you for kind of the bumps and bruises of the season. Is there anything to that validity in terms of how training camp is run? Is that something to do with it, or is just like is it get off my lawn type of talk with kind of these old school players, you think?
I think it's get off my lawn kind of talk. I mean, I don't know, and maybe I don't have insight into all the training camps, but the one that I do read about a lot is the Rockets, and there's no going soft in the Rockets training camp or the practice. I mean, Jabari Smith broke his hand in practice last year. There's no let up with that. They run hard, they train hard in the off season. If anything, that to me is probably more of a cause of anything, is that they're training even harder in the off season. I mean, Van Vliet, tore his ACL in an off season workout. So if anything, it's the exact opposite. I mean, gone are the days where guys were dribbling the ball, smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer during training camp. These are pretty hardcore, high intensity, scientifically based training programs that people are going through in training camp and off-season workouts. So I think that's get off my lawn talk.
Where I would, I guess not argue, what I'd be curious to see is what the distribution of time in training camp looks like right now versus maybe how it was back in the 90s or potentially earlier? Like, is there some truth that there's a lot less time on scrimmaging and more time kind of specializing certain things? Because I think that is something that, and it's less so like you guys aren't trying hard, but it's that the efforts are and focus are placed in different areas, and maybe it's not preparing the players as well for the games that they're looking into. But I guess on the same token, I will say there's a lot of smart people running basketball organizations and training camps right now. So I don't know if it's just like over analysis or over specialization that is maybe leading to unintended consequences. But what I also just always have to mention, just in the terms of athletics in general, is as a society, like if you want a chance to be a professional basketball player, you're almost always going to specialize from a very, very early age. And I don't think that is as healthy for the human body in general as if you have a mix of sports and trying different things, making yourself an overall athlete before you turn into a specialized athlete. And the reality is it's a systemic level issue where if you don't do that, you're going to run the risk of not making it to the pros if you have the potential to do so. So it's automatically setting people up to be kind of unbalanced athletes going into that situation. And that's just the way things are right now. And I don't see us moving away from that as it is right now. And to a certain extent, I mean, Paul George sits a lot. His career has been riddled with injuries. It's very unfortunate. I mean, he had that devastating injury early on preparing for the Olympics, I believe, or maybe it was the World Championship.
Olympics, yeah, in Vegas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, though, Paul George is one of the top 5 most successful players in terms of salary that he's earned as a basketball player. So there's been a lot of success in that level. It's unfortunate that we can't rely on seeing stars every single game. But again, I think it's hyper cautiousness with the teams. Maybe there is some extra load management type stuff from the player side too. But really, again, I just think it's the nature of modern basketball and the speed of the game. And I know people point to the pace of play, like in the 60s and 70s was a pretty fast-paced game in terms of number of possessions. But there is just more complicated schemes that are happening nowadays. And I do think that is leading to, combined with you have maybe better general level athletes coming into their basketball career compared to very, very specialized athletes coming into their career now.
Yeah, I like what you said about that, because I think about like LeBron, right? I mean, he played football and basketball. Chris Paul did bowling and basketball. I think there's something to be said for that, to help with longevity if you've got just an overall regimen that kind of moves everything around. But that's a really good point. I go back to kind of like, you were talking about no one's going to shorten the season, but do you think fewer back-to-backs would be a help? Because I know, like, so for example, right now the Rockets have played 0 back-to-backs. They don't hit their first back-to-back till next weekend. It certainly didn't stop Tari Eason from getting injured, but that was more of a freak injury. I don't know what that does if people at least have at least one day of rest between games. Thoughts on that?
I think that should be automatic. I mean, the Bulls have that nightmarish road trip. I mean, it happened recently. They played the Jazz, and I think either overtime or double overtime, they lose. They somehow beat Denver, who was on a 7-game winning streak. I mean, some miracle. I mean, they're always, every single year, they go through this. So yeah, I think the players should negotiate eliminating back-to-backs. I think that should be automatic. I think that would help some things, my guess. Just from a layman's fan point of view, it just seems I just think in terms of just the value in terms of attending a game, that would help things a lot. Because odds on it, if there's a back-to-back, unless, we're headed towards the end of the season, a superstar's going to most often sit out one of those 2 games. So I just think eliminating those would have a lot of help, especially since the schedule is not going to decrease.
Yeah, and Steve Kerr, you guys probably saw, I mean, he made a big point to talk about the Warriors' schedule through this first month of the season because they've had the most back-to-backs. And I don't know if you guys saw me on Twitter. You guys can follow me on Twitter, by the way. I was doing some digging on this. What do back-to-backs look like for the teams and as far as this is scheduled? And it looks like all teams are within the 13 to 16 back-to-back scenario over the course of the season. So some teams have more than others, certainly. The Rockets they have 14 back-to-backs on their schedule. Interestingly, the Warriors have 15. So really, they only have one more back-to-back, but the frequency of those for the Warriors has happened a lot more quickly. So that is something that it seems like scheduling-wise, I know there's a lot to building an NBA schedule, but it seems like you could have those play out a little bit more evenly of a frequency for those teams as they go through the season, because everyone's very, very close to the same amount of back-to-backs. But it seems like also you could bring that number even closer to the same, like maybe it's just everyone has 14 back-to-backs. I mean, or you get that down to that number 13 that people will get very superstitious about. But really, my point being, you wouldn't have to lengthen the season all that much. It doesn't seem to get everyone on the same number of back-to-backs anyway. That's just something that should be done in the interest of fair competitive advantage anyway. I think there's an interesting conversation that we could go on for a lot longer about the business advantage potential of stretching your season a little bit longer. Everyone's very excited about the NBA dominating like off-season controversies and transactions and things like that. Would extending the footprint of the NBA season to avoid more of those back-to-backs be beneficial? I don't know. Maybe so, maybe not. But I do agree that you're not going to see the 82-game season reduce, both for financial impact and then I think also for the history of the sport. We've put a lot of value, everyone raving about LeBron, like the biggest LeBron fans are going to point to his counting stats. And that's something that if you reduce the number of games per season, fans, I think, are going to, at least a significant number of fans, are going to flip out a little bit about.
No, true. And I think to your point about younger athletes, specializing in one sport, the big reason for that is money. I mean, the rise of social media. Of course. I think before, if you have, a child that might be interested in playing multiple sports, which one's more lucrative in terms of college offers. Now, I mean, at this point, you can have a kid that's a superstar in like the second and third grade. If they're playing basketball, they're bringing in money just through their social media following, and all of a sudden they're in high school. I mean, what's the incentive of playing football when you're, going to be a millionaire before you even enter college? I mean, the landscape's totally different. We're not even talking about AAU. And all these other things. So
yeah, look at Michael Porter Jr. as an 8th grader.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Plenty of footage there. You're right. Sorry, Alan.
Another thing is, I think as a positive, I will say to Adam Silver's credit, I know he's taken a lot of heat, lately, but you take a look at the depth of the league. And even with like the Washington Wizards, who are horrendous in terms of the record, it just seems to me like, you correct me if I'm wrong, from a 90s point of view and even the 80s compared to now, when you watch a game on League Pass or when you just watch a game on one of these national networks, there is a value in terms of watching a game that you may not know the teams too well, but there might be a star player to watch. I think that has increased over the years in terms of creating more parity. And I think that has helped in terms of the ratings, in terms of, teams that might be a surprise, like the Pistons. They've been building for this moment. We'll get to them in a second. But you've seen them build towards the draft, and it's not a shock to see them have the success in it. They're led by Kay Cunningham. So I think a lot of your NBA fans kind of adopt an attitude kind of in terms of, hey, there's a decent player on every single team. I think that's helped a lot in terms of, your main superstar players getting hurt, but it's not ruining the season where there's just a bunch of, guys that you don't know. I think if you're in the NBA sphere, there is a lot to still be thankful about and be excited about despite the main stars being hurt. So I think that is a positive in terms of increasing parity in the league.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, do you mind if I take a real quick digression?
Yeah, of course.
Please
So,
do.
Matt, you brought up Michael Porter Jr., who's a favorite subject of mine right now. I don't know if anybody saw my tweet, but I tweeted out, has any star ever done more to be disliked than Michael Porter Jr.? I don't know if you all saw his comments about tipping yesterday. He was like, if I spend $3,000 on a meal, why would I tip $600 or something? I mean, what is it? It's like he's auditioning for a post NBA career with Outkick or something. I don't know what's going on with this guy, but he really, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, and we'll digress further, but we can tie it into the injury. I have a way to tie it in, but the modern era where you definitely, now more than ever, you can say a lot more than you need to say, and you can say stuff that will expose maybe how unrelatable you are to potential fans. And so that's a dangerous thing that players have to watch out for with, turning on the podcast mic and all those things. And it's one thing for, like Stephen A. Smith to rile people up. That's what he's getting paid to do. If you're representing a team and trying to get fans in the seats, that's kind of the case for the Nets, telling him, like, watch what you say on your podcast. There's a line there that is being carved out right now that we're seeing. I mean, ultimately, I don't think this is going to change Brooklyn Nets attendance one way or the other because they're just kind of an unfortunate team, as we predicted they would be this year. But yeah, it's interesting to see the player podcast era and what can come of it.
Well, I think that applies to team sports, because individual sports is about generating a reaction and the interest of the individual, especially within combat sports. So the more incendiary, the more just controversial the rhetoric, you can go in many different directions, the higher the draw you'll be. Whereas I think in team sports, depending on the player, if you're a distraction, and if you don't match that production, you're gone. I mean, you can go to Colin Kaepernick, you can go to Tim Tebow. Both were distractions, both out of the league. Even though I think they had some kind of potential, but there is too much distraction. You can go Chad Johnson. I think that's more of an NFL situation. I don't think we've really seen that within the NBA of a player garnering a lot of distraction off the court. I think the only thing I would say to your point about podcasts is Draymond Green. He's in the beef with King and Martin right now. But I just, I don't know. I think the NBA has a lot more player expression. So I think with Michael Porter Jr., like you were saying, Matt, I don't think it's going to affect Nets attendance either way.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably 2 weeks away from him posting a workout with Andrew Tate. So we'll see what happens then.
Oh, my God. Well,
I didn't know that could drive more eyeballs to the league. You never know.
He should go into the UFC. He'll fit in right in there.
But what I was going to say to tie this to this injury conversation, I think in judging public opinion, I think fans and the media also have some fatigue in talking about injuries. Ironically, I think a lot of people see this for what it is, see a lot of the points that we've made today, and just kind of want to continue rolling with kind of the positive broadcast that we've seen so far this year that I think has helped the league a lot. I think you will see a lot of pushback for comments. I think on the one hand, like the comments that Steve Kerr made, for example, like people just don't want to hear complaints about your schedule, about your job, so to speak. I think on the other hand, Steve Kerr is maybe highlighting an issue that the league needs to look at as to why was scheduling done this way? We talked similarly about the Fever's brutal schedule when they started, when Caitlin Clark was starting out, and how detrimental that was to their season initially. So I think there's And maybe that conversation needs to happen behind closed doors, but maybe Kerr is just kind of playing smart politics and bringing it to the public light. I don't know. I'm trying to be gracious and not just completely take it as he's just complaining about his job. But I do think there is a certain level of fatigue that fans we understand we don't want you to be hurt. So rest if you need to. And if doctors are telling you to do that, that is what it is. Some fans are going to think about it a different way maybe, but we want the players to be healthy. We want to see the players. And it's unfortunate that that's not happening all the time, but I don't know that there are solutions that anyone's offered that I have seen, because even when you look at shortening the season and less volume of games, we haven't played very many games to this point, and there's tons of injuries. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you could show me like, hey, in April and May, this is when everyone's getting hurt, then you've got a case for shortening the season or something along those lines. But I just don't see it when you're seeing the pileup of injuries right at the beginning of the year.
Well, to both your points, I think because this is a very nuanced and complicated problem to solve, I think what's going to happen is, and I think you've seen it with the NFL, you're going to see the in-arena experience increase. So it's not going to be necessarily about going to see the players. It's going to be kind of like seeing the environment, like the Intuit Dome, right? Like you go see a Clippers game, Kawhi may be out, whoever may be out, but the dome is the attraction, right? Like you get the experience seeing the wall of fans, seeing the screen up there. Like that's why they're building on these new state-of-the-art arenas. And you see it in the NFL with the Broncos tearing down a stadium that they put $100 million in. I mean, it's about the experience that coincides with the game itself. So I think that's where you're going to see is where it's like you're compensating for your star players getting hurt. It's more about, hey, let's go to the arenas to see this big NBA experience. The players getting hurt, it's like, oh, it's a bummer, but at least we get to, enjoy the other parts of it as well. So I think that's where we're going to see in terms of really all sports is increasing the in-arena experience. But the bummer is that probably ticket prices are going to go up, unfortunately, because of this.
Great point. Got to innovate.
Yeah, totally. Let's transition to some hot topics here. And let's break down the Pistons. They are 13-2. That's recording up this podcast in the Eastern Conference. I would say very mediocre in the East. You take a look, really, besides the Pistons, 12 through, I would say, 11, with the Celtics being at the 11th seed right now. Not too much separating these teams. We talked about injuries. That continues to be the prolonged story here. ESPN published an article recently saying, what kind of a future does Detroit have in terms of capitalizing on this momentum? The team has control of their draft picks for the next 7 years and multiple large contracts on expiring deals waiting to be unloaded next season for open cap space. Here is from Vincent Goodwill. It says there's an internal desire to see this group together before pressing fast forward on the rest of the season. He says that, but ownership told ESPN they are not afraid of making a large commitment should the front office come with a proposal. Seeing if Ivy can make the star leap, similar to Durant's will be fascinating, especially as the Pistons will know more about themselves through the remainder of this year, with a difficult West Coast trip coming at the end of December. So what do you think about this? What should the Pistons do? Because I just see it. You see the playbook of the Thunder in terms of them just sticking to the plan, and we see the results of that. Why do you think there's just this panic for the Pistons to make a star trade when things are working? Like, why you just stick to the plan? Why is there just right now they're on top? Honestly, I believe the second best record in the league other than the Thunder. So why is there this prolonged spot of making some kind of trade when the Pistons things are clicking right now? And I'll start with Alan first.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on the Pistons are they're in a great spot. They remind me of, say, the Rockets from last year, where their calling card is defense, defense, defense. They've got a good coach. Do they make a swing? They've got some, like Houston last year, they have some glaring things missing from the team that they've got some veterans to kind of to do for them, but they need more outside shooting. But I mean, look, Jalen Duren is an all-star this year. He's on the cusp of being a superstar because, if you average 20, 21 and 13 or something like that, I mean, that's dominant against anybody. and he plays good defense. I think that I mean, Cade is a superstar. I think they've got their guys. Aiden, I mean, we've not seen really much of Jaden this year. Marcus Sasser's been hurt all year, so their guard play has been a little, outside of Cade, has been a little weaker. I think if the right deal comes along, go for it. But there was some crazy thing about Anthony Davis interest in Detroit, and it was like, come on, no. What? And I'm sure Trajan Langdon is laughing about that. I'm sure that's coming from the Dallas weeks, because there's just they don't need Anthony Davis. They've got their big men with Stu and Duran and that's in that lineup. I think I kind of agree with the front office. You write it out and see what you can actually do with this group. There's no rush here. Their best players are young, and under contract. Well, Jalen Duran's not under contract, but I don't see him leaving Detroit. I think they'll end up having to max him out at that 5-year max, unless somebody is offering some sort of, unless somebody offers up Devin Booker, or somebody similar to give them like that outside scoring punch. I don't think you make any moves, or Ant, if Ant becomes available. But other than that, I think you wait and you see what the offseason brings. You see what happens in the playoffs. You see if you can get through a series or two, and see what happens there. And because that'll be where you'll find out what your real weaknesses are, and then look to address those in the offseason.
Yeah, well said. Detroit, you have Asar Thompson, so I feel like you're kind of our brother franchise. Me being a Houston Rockets fan, of course. So, just look at Houston, look at OKC, take your time. You're in a great spot. I totally agree with what you said there, Alan. Furthermore, I think it's still, I said at the start of the season, and I'll stick with it, I think Detroit is like one of those try-hard teams where they're going to win a lot more games in the regular season because they do legitimately try hard every game. I don't see them right now still as like a threat to make a ton of noise in the Eastern Conference. And I just would not want to get rid of a ton of future assets. I don't think it's the move right now. Even if you got to the finals, which would be great, do you want to leverage all that future potential that you have to run into OKC in the finals right now? I don't think I would go that route with Detroit. I think just hold strong, and maybe next season they can be in that like title threat conversation. And that doesn't mean they can't win a round or two and make some noise in the postseason. I just think the odds of winning the title right now, I don't know, let Cade continue to develop and become that elite player he is. And then you have plenty of time to strategize and see what that next max piece you want to put next to him is.
I think it's going to be really funny when they trade for Zion in the offseason for pennies on the dollar.
You will break my heart, Detroit. Do not do that. But hey,
it's a horrible move. Yeah.
And even, the other name I see thrown around is Lauri Markkanen. Mm-hmm. But you're dealing with Danny Ainge there. He's going to ask for a lot. And Lauri might be a good fit on that Pistons roster. I think maybe a better fit than Anthony Davis, depending on what they're giving up to get him in return. But I just would hold tight. You don't need to put all your chips in right now. And we're looking at the difference between maybe, one or two runs versus if you play it slow, you have that potential to build a dynasty.
Yeah, totally agree. I want to move just quickly through this next topic, and that is the Atlanta Hawks without Trae Young. Right now, as I said earlier, they're 9-7, so right in the middle of the pack of the Eastern Conference. What are you guys' feelings on what's going on with the Hawks? I'll just read you this excerpt from The Athletic. It says, quote, "I don't trust Atlanta more than that. I don't trust Trae Young. That the Hawks have played better without him, it's more of a concern for me. Jalen Johnson looks like a good bet for a first-time All-Star, but I don't trust this team to put a top 15 offense without Young. I think his persistent wrecks the Hawks defense, though. Adding Kristaps Porzingis injuries, and I don't think this team will find a necessary balance this year. I think the bones of a really good team are here, but it will take another transition cycle to get to the right roster." So what's the deal here? Because I feel like they're kind of like a Chicago. They're just painfully mediocre. They got like this superstar to get some hope, but like they're not going to make any noise. Like they're just kind of spinning their wheels. Like what's the point of this? Like it's just like they're not going to be competitive. Like they're not going to win a title. I don't see them getting out of first round. So is it just better just to blow up this team now and start from scratch, or what's really the point of this? Because I feel like I get Bulls vibes from this team in terms of this. It's just a waste of time at this point. And Mac, you can go first.
Yeah, I think given the narrative is going that way, as you eloquently laid out there, it's a bad time right now to trade Trae Young. You want him to come back and show some promise, show that elite skill set that he has. But I do agree, if you can get value for Trae Young, go ahead and move that piece. You're not going to get right now a lot of value for Kristaps Porzingis, so I think you ride that out a little bit. But yeah, you guys know I have never been very high on Trae Young. No disrespect intended. I don't think he can be your main piece on a title team. He could maybe be second option, but we're looking at maybe does he need to be the third option if you're looking at competing for a title team in terms of the hierarchy of your team. Obviously, to utilize Trae Young, he's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. But maybe he can find that next to like an elite wing or post threat somewhere else in order to be able to maximize what he can bring to a team. I just don't think on like a super max deal at this point, he's really going to lead you to a title, and you'll get a lot of highlights, but unfortunately, I think a lot of empty calories too. So yes, I would say to make a short point, I would try to move out of the Trae Young era if I was Atlanta, but I've been of that opinion for this is not the first year.
I agree with you, Matt. Justin, I agree with you too. I think Atlanta's not really going anywhere. I think it's time. They've got a savvy front office. I mean, so I think it's time to move on. Honestly, I would look at a team that wants to do better and might take a swing on them to increase their flagging attendance and get rid of some of the players they have who they don't think are that great. So I could see Trae Young being somehow involved in the Sacramento Kings fire sale. So his salary matches with a lot of the guys over there. And if Atlanta can get some draft picks in addition to some of those players, which I think they could, because I don't think Sacramento is very savvy, then I think you could see some rough times in Atlanta for a little bit, but it'd be more of a rebuilding on the run kind of thing. The thing you don't want to do, honestly, is you don't want to waste Jalen Johnson or Risache. You don't want to waste those guys. You want to be able to rebuild quickly enough that you can still capitalize on them being really awesome players. So that's where I'm at with them.
Hey, while we're at it, Justin, you brought up the Bulls.
Yes.
And they had a very sweet victory against Portland the other night. Vooch, I'm sure you saw that with the game winner. And we're still at a point in the season where the Bulls are above 500. So Justin, I wonder if I can just throw to you for just a quick Bulls minute while we're still in the winning ways of the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah. Well, the timing, not so great, them getting annihilated for them by Miami Heat. But
overall, I'd avoid that.
Yeah, but I'm a realist, so I guess keeping it real. I will say Josh Giddey, a career high in points, rebounds, assists. He's their star player. Kobe White's been hurt. The Bulls do have a pretty favorable schedule. I mean, they play the Wizards as a recording of this podcast, the Hornets, the Pacers. I mean, those are very winnable games. If you're a decent team, you should beat them. And then you have the Magic, who I don't know, Paul Banchero will be back for that game. And then they have the Nets. So, the majority of those games are really winnable. And the Magic, they should be competitive, if not win that game, I believe. So I think it's good to see the Bulls rely on young talent. I think it's a matter of just seeing where this goes in the future. But I'd rather have it this way where you're building on core stars rather than, aging players from other franchises where you're just trying to make a run for a year and they're not even, I would say they're mid-level all-stars. They're not elite level players that, you don't have a Kawhi for a year or something like that. So it's exciting to see, I think, this team compared to other teams just because of the younger talent.
Awesome. Totally agree. They're a fun squad. I think
they're fun to watch.
That's what we kind of texted earlier in the
Right.
week. I mean, they're a fun team to get behind and root for.
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely.
and I think more so. I mean, we both really liked DeMar DeRozan, so it's fun to root for him. But I think in some ways this team is more fun to root for than that era with DeRozan, Levine, Vooch, where you kind of just felt more stuck than this era where it feels like there can be some growth.
Yeah, it was just mediocre, and I just feel like without Lonzo, he got hurt very early during that run. I just felt it was just stuck in place. Last topic before we head out, that's the Rockets. So I'll turn it back to both y'all. The Rockets still making noise, had a huge heavyweight match with the Denver Nuggets. Really great game. The Rockets fell short. They're 10-4, right in the middle of a really competitive Western Conference. Sengun has been awesome. That's ranked the 6th best player on Hoopsology's global ranking. And the Rockets have the best offensive rating in the NBA, 123.4, but the lowest assist percentage in the NBA, 57.6. So what are you guys' thoughts on this? And I have another question before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll start. They also have the lowest amount of three-pointers attempted in the NBA, yet the number one offense. Now, they shoot those three-pointers, they make those three-pointers at a pretty high rate, and a lot of their bread and butter on offense is coming from a relentless offensive rebounding strategy. And there was an article, and I don't remember where, but it goes back to the Rockets have been always very closely tied with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, their G League team, where they've spent a lot of time before any other of the teams did this, doing really crazy experimental things, going back to the Harden days of the all threes all the time to a few years ago, crashing the boards like crazy for offensive rebounds. So more than any other team, they use their G League team as a place to really just experiment and see what might work. So that served them well here because they honestly, it also doesn't hurt to have Steven Adams, one of the all-time great offensive rebounders in the game. I think that the Rockets offense is for real. I don't know if that offensive rebounding rate will stay as high as it is. But for a team missing their starting point guard, they have adapted, and I don't think they're even as good as they can be. I think they're still learning. But I just wanted to take one moment to shout out Reed Shepherd. Everyone who sold stock on Reed Shepherd after last year and thought he was a bust, it's time to kind of relent on that. The guy's for real. He's got the right attitude. I mean, if you saw like Desmond Bain tried to get in his head and like push him and taunt him, and Reed trips him going back up the floor. I mean, he's got some nasty in him. Not like a Grayson Allen kind of nasty, but like he's not going to back down from you. And he's playing with confidence. That Denver game last night is a blowout if Reed Shepherd doesn't play like he did. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on the Rockets right now.
Yeah, well said. And that game against Denver, I mean, that really was the high mark, is that it was sort of a coming out party for Reed Shepherd. Like, hello, welcome to the NBA. Just very pretty jump shot, very crafty ball movement and things that he was doing. And that's the thing really that I kind of wanted to focus on with my point, is that this offense still is by no means set in stone as far as what it's going to be, because for most of the night last night, Reed Shepherd wasn't even bringing up the ball. It was Amen Thompson or Sengun kind of sharing duties on that. And you had a game where they lose to Denver. That's a great team. And yes, we mentioned they didn't have Aaron Gordon. They didn't have Christian Brown, but it's still Denver. It's still Jokic. Jokic was just great last night, as he always is. And you have bad games from both KD and Sengun, and you only lose to Denver by 3 points. And that's a lot of that from the boost that Reed Shepherd gave them. So I think I would be concerned if they're heavily reliant on the offensive rebounding going into the playoffs, because now teams will have time to scheme against that a little bit more and maybe limit that a little bit more. But the positive side would be the growth potential that you have here in Reed Shepherd as he goes through that season, and also just kind of figuring out more of a flow with this offense. Because despite the scoring, it still looks like at times, like the eyeball test is telling me that they really don't quite know what to do on that side of the floor, which is really interesting given the success that they're having.
Yeah.
Question for you both. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, did either of you notice too in the second half that Denver shifted their best defenders onto Reed Shepherd? I mean, that's a pretty big sign of respect.
Good point. Yep.
Totally. Before we say goodbye, question for both of you. For Sengun, seems like he's having a breakout season in terms of kind of the mainstream NBA zeitgeist. What is the ceiling for him this season? Do you see a first team All NBA possible? No chance. Does he kind of work his way with all these injuries? Can he get into kind of the top 5 MVP discussion here, or do you think that's like too high to be talking about that right now? I just see he has a lot of momentum. I just see kind of the swagger. It's just something different about him this year compared to other years, besides play on the court.
I think definitely he could move into like second team All NBA. I think All NBA is coming for him. I think obviously he's a definite All-Star. I think he'll be top 10, probably top 7 MVP candidate if he continues kind of what he's doing. The thing I think that's really going to help him is that as he gets more exposure, he is such a funny, crafty guy to interview and talk to after the games or in between games. I think the first time NBC does some sort of sit down with him and talks about his past, and I think he's going to be a guy who becomes other fans of other teams become fans of his. And I think that'll help drive him into global superstardom. It certainly doesn't hurt that he took a Turkey team that really had nobody else on it all the way to the Eurobasket finals. I think the sky is the limit for this guy right now. And he's only, 23? I mean, it's kind of an insane ceiling now that he has.
Yeah, Alan, I think you're spot on right there with the projections and maybe the accolades that he'll earn this season. I think when he came into the league, Baby Jokic was such a compliment. And now Baby Jokic is a little bit more of an insult with how he's playing, because there are distinguishable differences between their play styles, no doubt. There are some things that, Sengun is nowhere near Jokic's elite level in certain areas, but last night, it being appropriately Denver versus Houston, it was a moment where it kind of a pump the brakes moment for Sengun, and he'll bounce back. He's going to have a great season, no doubt. I agree with all those accolades you mentioned, but it was a little bit of like, okay, I'm Jokic, come at me, baby Jokic. And, Jokic like putting his hand on the little brother's head, and the little brother is like trying to throw punches at him and not landing them. That was a little bit what happened last night. It was just bad timing for not the best game for Sengun compared to the rest of the season, but he's going to have an incredible season, and he's going to continue to grow because, like you mentioned, Justin, he is so young, and I think top 10 guy in the league is very feasible by the time this season is all said and done, and he could grow from there.
Yeah, totally.
And I gotta say too, because KD is allowing this growth to happen.
Good point.
So I gotta give a tip of the cap to him, and also a few nights ago, I can't remember who they were playing, but I do remember KD just really, really pumping up Reed Shepherd after a big play that he made, like smacking him on the chest, giving him high five and stuff, just really, really playing it up. I think KD is super happy in Houston right now. I know it's early, it's still honeymoon phase, but this is awesome to see. And I have had my criticisms of KD, so I do want to give him a shout out because he's being a good leader here in Houston.
Yeah, I wanted to point out just one thing about Sengun, one more thing before kind of turn it back over, but is I am convinced that Denver went and got Jonas Valanciunas because he has been the guy who has given Sengun the most trouble in his career. No matter where Jonas has been, he has been like kryptonite to Sengun. And in previous years, when Denver and Houston have played, Sengun's dominated that matchup because there's been no one other than Jokic who can even hang with him. But now that, Jokic goes to the bench and Valanciunas comes in, I think that's tough for Sengun, and that's going to be an area of growth for him because Sengun is sneaky strong. I don't think people realize how strong he is, but he does struggle against the very few people who are stronger than him, guys like Duran and Valanciunas.
Well, that's going to be exciting to see because, with superstar players, you usually got to go through a bit of a crucible to get to that next level. And that's going to be Denver for the Houston Rockets. So we're going to see if he's up for the challenge. Anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we wrap it up?
Hey, we're 1 month into the NBA season. I know there's all this injury talk, but despite that, what a start for the league.
I agree.
I'm still really enjoying the broadcasts. I'm much more enjoying tuning into the games. Stephen A. Smith has been taken off of ESPN's NBA countdown rotation, which I'm still pretty surprised by that decision. And I'm not even the biggest Stephen A. Smith critic out there, but pretty shocked by that. But I just think things are in a pretty good spot with the league, and you didn't have to rely on LeBron James being there. I think the point is well made this season. You didn't need LeBron James to roll out the season. I'm glad he's back on the Lakers. I'm glad he's back, but I think it's a pretty big understated triumph for the league. And what we talk about all the time on this show, that you need to promote the young talent in your league. This season is proof positive of that so far because there's so many interesting things to watch.
Yeah. Well said, Matt. I agree. This season's been fire so far. Just some great games. The Cup games have been pretty impressive. So I'm excited to keep watching.
I echo your guys' sentiments. It's been an awesome season so far, and hopefully it continues. That's going to end our show. I appreciate you spending the time. Again, if you have any questions for us, contact us on social media. Our email address, is hoopsologypod@gmail.com. Send us an email. Agree, disagree. We'd love to hear your feedback. And check out our archives. We've covered the majority of the teams. We continue to bring you the best journalists that are covering these teams day in, day out. Usually they have other part-time jobs. They do this for the passion of the game, and just check out their work because they are bringing you coverage. We pride ourselves on bringing you teams that you may not know a lot about that are going to make some noise, and we can kind of get you into a little bit of their culture in terms of each NBA team. So check out our archives as well. So for Matt Thomas and Alan Muenzler, I am Justin Goodrum. Enjoy your weekend, enjoy your Thanksgiving, and enjoy the games as well. Whether you're watching the NBA or just sports in general, we will see you next time. See ya.
Peace.
Later.